I think that modern day urban policing as it currently exists is definitely a form of institutional racism, absolutely. And not just policing, but the criminal justice system more broadly. That's not to say there's not a lot of good people trying to do good work, but the system itself is not designed to allow poor people to succeed and to become mainstream. It's just not set up that way. It's changed the way police interact with the citizens. When the citizens over time see the police continuing to enforce adult consensual behavior, if you will, whatever it is, whether it's drug use, whether it's gambling, whether it's prostitution, whatever it is that adults, for whatever reason, decide, even though it might not be that good for them, to engage in, and the police then penalize by arrests and charging for those offenses, it tends to polarize communities. And we really hadn't seen that before, at least we hadn't seen it en masse before the over-criminalization that has resulted from our drug laws. And, well, except for slavery, there's that. I think what we're seeing now, now that we've had time to look back and reflect on zero tolerance policies, what we're seeing now that we've had a chance to look back and reflect on these policies is that, yeah, they might have worked in the short term, but in the long term they did so much collateral damages to people that were ensnared. And as a result, those folks can't do a whole lot of things they would have been able to do otherwise, and they can't be contributing members of the community. And so over the long haul, zero tolerance was one of the worst things we've ever done as a policing profession. So I think that the criticism directed at those that were leading that is well-founded. I don't necessarily think that at the time they intended or could see or forecast exactly how bad it was going to turn out for the communities that were targeted, but we see that today. And yeah, so no more zero tolerance. We can't repeat that cycle. You know, people make decisions all the time, but people who make decisions from a place of zero hope and zero role models, modeling, and they don't see a vibrant industry in their community. They don't see, you know, grocery stores and, you know, light industrial complexes and, you know, general just buzzing, humming business activities and places where they can go as very young people, you know, follow their parents to work and then go and do internships. If you don't have the hope of seeing any of that happening in your community, and the only trade that seems to be putting money on anybody's table is a drug trade, you know, I don't think those choices can be judged so lightly from people who have grown up in very different circumstances. I think it's probably a lot like it was back in the late 60s. You know, people were feeling really outraged. The videos and the capturing both by the police and the public of some really just horrific engagements, I think has finally percolated to the place where everyday people were starting to pay attention, and it gives me hope, because I think that there's been a lot of abuses over the years going on that we just either didn't believe because we didn't have what we thought was the proper evidence, and you know, the police come across and can be very credible and caring, and when bad officers do bad things, it's a lot easier to think back about the interaction you might have had with a good officer and dismiss that. So I think that things have finally gotten to a point where people are tired of being silent and are demanding some sort of change. So I hope that will continue. This isn't going to be just a blip. That's my concern. It's going to be a blip. Because it's so easy to get, because as you said, I mean, this is very, very complicated. And it's going to take, it took a long time to get to where we are, and it's going to take a lot. You can't turn a cruise ship on a dime. You can't turn a battleship on a dime. So the time it's going to take to redirect all the policies and all of the work and energy that will go into that, there's always that possibility that something more important will come along to deflect everyone's attention and turn us to something else. So.
My name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic.
Dorothy T., and I am an alcoholic.
For so long, alcohol has sort of been there for me to sort of see me through social situations.
Drinking was more important than anything else.
My journey in AA started years ago when I reached the outside limits of my desperation.
I really wanted to quit drinking, I just couldn't stop on my own. And you know, I remember when I woke up on the day that I got sober, I felt something inside of me tell me that I could go to AA.
These people, you know, just gathered around me. That was the fellowship in action in my life.
The moral of my story today is that AA has never let me down, ever.
If I carry any sort of message with my story, it's that, you know, keep coming back and that this thing does work.
If you have a problem with alcohol, contact AA. It works.
How do you change history? You can change history by walking and marching. You can change history by speaking and teaching. You can change history by taking a stand or taking a seat. But the best way to change history is when you becomes we. We tore down that wall. We marched for equality. We made sure that love knew no boundaries. Now you can become we right here in Vancouver. We can end HIV. We can change history. It begins with a test. Testing today can range from a blood test that'll inform you in about a week to some locations where a prick of the finger gets you a result in 60 seconds. Diagnosing HIV early changes everything. It prevents the virus from attacking your body, and it prevents it from spreading through our communities. All each of us has to do is step up and take a test. Changing history is that simple. Testing centers are available throughout the city, or just ask your doctor at your next regular visit. And if your doctor offers a test, say yes. It's just the responsible thing to do. Then, share the word. Tell people that HIV treatment has changed. Tell people that testing has advanced. Tell people that the entire approach to HIV is different now. Let them know that by choosing to take a test, we can all end HIV. This is a fact. We are so close. But to become we've got to have you. We need you to do your part. We need you to share the word, take the test, join the movement. End HIV. Change history. Learn more at itsdifferentnow.org.
So, in my opinion, we have to change the culture. And that is not going to be an easy thing to do. I talk about it as a culture of vengeance. So the police don't respect the people they're policing, by and large. And the people that are being policed don't respect the police. And when you put those two combinations together, you're not going to solve problems. You're not going to resolve community disputes. You're not going to be able to solve crime. You're not going to be able to focus on the things that are really important to the people that are living day in and day out in those communities. So what we have to do is we have to change who we're hiring and why. We have to change how we're training them, who's training them, and what the focus of the training is on. Once the officers come out of the police academy, you know, they have to be given strong role models that are committed to not mass incarceration, but making the community better and being problem solvers and not enforcers. We have to get it back to a place, or if we ever were, we may not have been in this country ever, but we have to get to a place where we're no longer policing by force, but we're policing by consent. And what I mean by that is you're not doing what is right because the officer is threatening to beat you upside the head or tase you. You're doing what is right because you and the community and the police department have had conversations about dispute resolution, and therefore you buy into the system. If you as a citizen don't agree to be policed, then we might as well be in Nazi Germany. Well, you know, it's been a struggle that we've seen many jurisdictions over the past decade or so try to hold police accountable, going as far back to the Rodney King in LA. And there were plenty of recommendations that came out of that, and transparency and making sure that the police have the citizens have a say in police policy and procedure and making sure that they have a voice at the table when officers are being disciplined. There's all that kind of stuff. But I think it's gonna be really hard to change. Like I said, it all comes back to the culture. I mean, we can throw numbers at, and part of the problem I think with police accountability is no one has been willing to fund it. We give the police, to their defense, so many unfunded mandates, whether it be tracking the number of people who buy guns or who buy bullets, or tracking the number of sex offenders, or tracking all the DNA, swabbing all this stuff of everyone who's ever been arrested for certain crimes. We give them all this work to do, but then we don't focus the money on that work, right? We focus the money on them going out and locking people up for possession of drugs, which is stupid. Right? You should be focusing the money on the things that are going to increase the citizen confidence in policing through accountability measures. Yeah, I mean, like this whole Freddie Gray thing. Why is it so hard to buckle people up? When I was in the state police, right? I want to say May, we did this whole campaign about seatbelt awareness, right? And we would go out and we do all these surveys of people. And one of the biggest offenders was the police officers in Baltimore City refusing to buckle themselves up. They didn't want to put on their seatbelt because they thought they were less likely to be able to catch someone who was running if they had to actually unbuckle and then run. And we're like, seriously, you're more likely to die in a car crash. Right? Because back then, that's how most of the cops were getting hurt, was in car crashes. It's like, wear your freaking seatbelt. And if the cops aren't wearing them, why do they care about the prisoner? I mean, for years they just threw him in the back of the patrol car, right? Now you just throw him in the back of the wagon. And now the video doesn't work in the back of the wagon? Please. I say get rid of wagons. Wagons should be per se illegal. One officer, one prisoner. This mass incarceration stuff is not healthy. Anytime I arrested somebody, I knew from the minute I put handcuffs on them, for whatever the reason was, that their health, safety, and welfare was my problem. And I would make sure that my prisoner was well taken care of. I would give my prisoner water. I would give my prisoner food. I would treat them with respect. And I would get them to wherever their destination had to be safely. And for any police officers to stand before the court and say that's not my responsibility, I have to disagree there.
We're always ready for action.
We can do it in 2 minutes.
Now, when I was in high school, I couldn't do it in 2 minutes. By the time I got to college, 2 minutes was a cinch.
I really like it when a guy can do it in under 2 minutes.
The key to my marriage is doing it in under 2 minutes.
I can do it in 2 minutes.
I can do it in less than 2 minutes.
I can do it in under 2 minutes myself, and with my boyfriend.
Each year, the Red Cross responds to 66,000 disasters.
Most of them are home fires.
Most of them are home fires.
Ooh.
I know. Whoa.
7 people die each day, on average, from home fires.
7 people.
A day.
That's way too many people.
You can save your life and your family's life.
Make an escape plan.
Make an escape plan.
Make an escape plan.
It's critical that everyone can get out in under 2 minutes.
I can get from my bedroom to my front door in less than 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes.
I can take my shirt off, pour glitter all over myself, and still do it in 2 minutes.
Called my mom the other day, told her I did it in under 2 minutes. She was so proud.
1.5.
What? There's no way.
Yeah.
Check your smoke alarms monthly to make sure they're working properly.
Smoke alarms cut your risk of death or injury in half.
Half? It's 50%.
This little guy, cutting it in half.
And if it's beeping at you, don't rip it out of the wall. Give it a battery, Make it happy so it can help you get out of the house in time.
Make sure to visit redcross.org/2steps, 2 minutes.
2 steps.
2 minutes.
2 steps, 2 minutes.
Visit the link below to find out more.
Wherever it is.
Not there. Right here.
Hi, I'm here for my flu shot, and I understand that there are options for people who are 65 and older.
There are, but you don't look 65.
It's very flattering, but you know who I am. I just turned 65, and I know the immune system gets weaker with age.
Well, I don't think that we've met, but there's no way you were 65.
What if I said I only have one life to live, so I need protection against the flu? How about who's the boss of my health?
You've never seen Who's the Boss?
Oh, my boss is in the back.
See, flu season is here, and people 65 and older need to ask about the vaccine made specifically for their age. And it's particularly important for people who have conditions like heart disease and diabetes.
True to the light. Great seeing you. Come on back.
Visit the National Council on Aging at ncoa.org/flu to learn more and talk to your doctor about vaccine options for people 65 and older.
Look, I'm really sorry about that. I thought you were 35.
Don't apologize.
So LEOBR, Maryland LEOBR as we call it here, has been in place, I believe, since 1974. It is the holy grail of policing. I mean, it's very important to the officers to have those rights. Unfortunately, because the officers have not, the culture of policing has not elected to police by consent and is instead focusing on policing by force, we're now seeing the public saying, okay, fine, then you don't want to police the way we think we should be policed, therefore you shouldn't have the protections that you currently have. So I think that's where it's coming from. I don't know long term what these reforms are going to do. My hope is that they will check the union voice a little bit. I'm not anti-union, I'm very pro-union, but at the same time, when the union is putting in protections that basically tie the hands of the chief in terms of discipline, particularly when you have officers who repeatedly get citizen complaints over and over and over again, and the chief's hands are kind of tied, I think it's a little bit of a problem. I think maybe there should be a distinction between, because we also have a culture of eating our own in policing. So the police, if someone gets on the bad side, right, they're not lining up and marching straight, the police will circle the wagons and do everything they can to destroy that officer internally. So LEOBR also applies in those situations, and a lot of times those officers have been minority, black, female, maybe gay in some instances, and they rely on LEOBR to allow them to be able to speak out sometimes. So there's that. But when you're dealing with citizen complaints, I don't know. I just think the chief should be able to call out bad apples at the end of the day. Their hands shouldn't be tied. And if they're not doing that, they don't even need the criminal justice system to do that. I think the indictments were very unfortunate that it came to that. I don't know if we'll see any convictions, honestly. I think a lot of this stuff is administrative at the end of the day. However, I do think the indictments changed the national discourse. And for that reason, I think they were necessary. Because something had to happen to get the attention of the leaders in law enforcement that the treatment towards citizens was unacceptable and cannot continue. And if that is what it took, while I feel bad for some of the folks that were ensnared in this, I think, the police have been overcharging the citizens for years. Overcharging, and then they get to a criminal trial, they don't have adequate representation, and they're forced. I mean, we plea out 96, 99% of criminal cases, depending on the math you run, and it's just as bad on the civil side. Very few things actually go to trial. And what we're seeing here with these officers who have the backing of the union and the backing of large swaths of the community, where they're getting really, really good representation. Every person charged with a crime, every person whose liberty is in jeopardy should have that equal level of protection. And if we were treating everybody the same, we wouldn't be in the morass we're in now. So, Well, my concern is, all right, so we're moving stuff now out of criminal justice, right? And we're going, let's use marijuana as an example. So now, many states are beginning to legalize and starting to decriminalize, and we're seeing different models depending on what state you're in. But by and large, we're moving everything from a criminal justice system into a civil system. It's still a system. And the reason why I'm unsure about some of this stuff is because I think that this civil system that we're setting up where body attachments are being issued for people that don't pay their child support. Body attachments are being issued for people that don't pay their judgments. And it's not necessarily because people don't want to pay their judgments, because they can't pay their judgments. So just simply by moving the name of the system, it's not necessarily going to change the outcome. And that's my concern, is that we're just creating another system. And then when we look back 50 years from now, we say, oh yeah, we had slavery, then we had Jim Crow, then we had mass incarceration, and now we've got this civil system that is basically having the same, at the end of the day, the same outcome. So that's where, if you see me pausing on stuff, I know that that path of unintended consequences is very real, and if we don't take the time to think long term about what our strategies are going to, what world our strategies are going to put us in, we're just repeating the same thing over and over again. But go back to the specific reforms, because some of them I agree with.
Yeah, I'm trying to put the darn things.
Like the 90-day thing.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree that should be a year, and because as it stands right now, if someone wants to believes that they have been a victim of police brutality, they have to physically come to the station. They have to sign an affidavit under oath and make a full disclosure, and they have to do that within 90 days. And if they don't do that within 90 days, that officer can never be charged with police brutality. They can only be charged with excessive force, which is, still pretty serious within the department, but it's very different. And I think that it makes perfect sense to extend that out to a year. And this whole thing that we have a year and a day to charge an officer administratively, I don't know. I think that that's probably a reasonable reform to push back against. I don't necessarily know that there should be a statute of limitations. The hearing board composition is probably going to be big. They're not going to like that because that's embedded in a lot of the police contracts. The 5-10-day rule, I don't know if they're going to care. I just don't know. They'll probably push back on that year and a day thing, because what happens is that especially in urban large police departments, so many complaints come in that they just can't investigate them all within a year. And so the officer just sits back, or whoever it is being accused, and they wait. Tick tock, year and a day. Sorry, you missed your window. And we even saw that in the state police, where we were really pretty good about following all the rules. There were some investigations you just couldn't wrap up in that amount of time. And then you had to wait for them to do something else, or for something else bad to happen. And that was a shame.
No 2 days are alike. So every day, you prepare. For yourself, for those you love, for whatever the day may bring. Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies, as well as any important documents you may need. Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. ready.gov/myplan.
I'm here for my flu shot, and I understand that there are options for people who are 65 and older.
There are, but you don't look 65.
It's very flattering, but you know who I am. What if I said, who's the boss of my health?
You've never seen Who's the Boss?
My boss is in the back.
Flu season is here, and people who are 65 and older need to ask about the vaccine made specifically for their age.
Judith Light, come on back.
Visit the National Council on Aging at ncoa.org/flu and talk to your doctor about vaccine options for people 65 and older.
The interesting thing for me about this whole body camera thing, so I was in the state police when we first came out with in-car cameras. So it was I think it was probably part of an ACL lawsuit against us. We got the money, maybe, perhaps, or at least the idea that maybe we should start filming these traffic stops because we were being accused of racial profiling. We were pretty adamant that we certainly weren't doing anything intentionally. But the officers initially, the troopers were very reluctant to have this equipment installed in their vehicles. They were very resistant. And what we saw time and time again was that more often than not, the video exonerated the officer. You were able to look at the video, you were able to read the citizen report, and they just didn't match up. And back then, the citizens did not have the technology to be able to record their own observation. So now that we have body cameras that are going to be put on the body of the officer, and the citizen is already, they're going to have lapel pins by the time the police departments get through all these contracts. I mean, we're going to be recording everything. And so it's going to be fascinating because you're going to see citizens at their worst. Because generally when the police are called, the citizens are in a very bad place. When the officer's being proactive and going out and clearing a corner is completely different. But when it's a really bad situation, whether it be a rape or a murder or B&E, and you get there in the middle of the night, I mean, or when you have to go and inform someone that their son or daughter's been killed in a car accident or whatever's going on, people are in a very vulnerable and bad place. So we're gonna have all of that, and what is the privacy rights going to look like there? Who's going to be making the decision as to what videos get disclosed and what videos don't get disclosed? And are we just going to post everything and then leave it to some journalists like yourself to call through it and figure out what's important? So this go around, whereas before we had just pretty much the police side of things, now we've got multiple vantage points, including buildings and everywhere else that has a camera. So it's just getting more and more complicated to figure out who done it, right? So right now, if an incident happens, the officer can be compelled to make a statement immediately. If the investigation is that important, they don't have to wait those 10 days, right? They'll write in their statement that they're being compelled and there are consequences that come from that, right? But like I said earlier, we're having a hard time wrapping up investigations within a year and a day, right? So, I don't see it. I understand that the community thinks that this is somehow going to make things different. I don't see it. It's like me telling you, I suspect you of burglary, and I'm going to bring you in for an interrogation, and it's like me saying, okay, you need to talk to me immediately, and you're like, whoa, time out, I want to get a lawyer. Unless I have enough probable cause to arrest you on the spot, I have to let you go and get counsel. And then we can schedule the interview at a mutually convenient date. I don't see this as being any different. I mean, I understand that the officers are held to a higher standard because they are serving, by and for the people. But I just don't really see this as the big deal that it's being made out to be. I think there's much more important reforms in there than that. But for me personally, I think that the current proposals to modify the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights are going to be used to leverage more important reforms. I think it's a very strong tool in the toolkit of the community and the activists that support the messaging to be able to get the police to get real about some of the necessary reforms. So I think it's a strategic and a very good strategic plan, by the way, because it is the holy grail for law enforcement. they count on those protections. I think the police lobby is something not to be underestimated. And it's not just the union, it's also every individual police department has their own lobbyist who goes down and lobbies for these changes in legislation, either for, against, or no comment. And it's a tremendous pressure on our legislators, not just here in Maryland. It's even worse out on the West Coast, way worse on the West Coast. The influence they have is not to be underestimated. And I think that going after LAOBR is one way to get their attention, that you've got to be reasonable. You can't say no to everything, which I think is their current position. No changes. Leave it alone. It's not helpful.
No. No.
No. No.
No. No lupus.
No lupus.
If we're going to say no to lupus,
we need to know lupus.
Lupus has completely changed my life.
Lupus is one of those things that takes over somebody's body and you don't know anything about it.
It's just unpredictable, it's tricky, confusing.
There's certain things that I can't do, but I still get up every morning and do it.
It's really a cruel mystery.
Lupus can impact any organ in the body, any organ.
It was attacking my kidney. Some people it's the brain, it's the heart.
I'd gone into stage 4 kidney failure, which sent me into respiratory failure, which almost made me lose my life.
When I was first diagnosed, that's when it really kicked in, just knowing that there was no cure.
I really felt like maybe I might not be able to make it through this.
We don't look like we have the disease, and I think that's also part of the problem.
You can be sick even though you don't look sick.
That is one of the cruel aspects of it, is there sometimes people don't believe you.
Lupus does not discriminate. It can affect men, women, white, black, older, younger.
I've had lupus for 10 years.
I am 17 years old. I am 11.
We've got to find a way to get through this.
The Lupus Foundation of America is a great organization because they're getting people out there, letting people know what it's all about.
And by knowing more, we'll be better able to help and unlock the mysteries that do surround lupus.
There is something we can do. There is hope.
Let's take this moment and turn it into a movement.
End the confusion and end lupus.
There is hope. We just have to get involved. I haven't given up.
I challenge you to know.
No.
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 No lupus. Go to lupus.org/no and help solve this cruel mystery.
No 2 days are alike. So every day, you prepare. For yourself, for those you love, for whatever the day may bring. Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies, as well as any important documents you may need. Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. ready.gov/myplan.
From a defense point of view, absolutely. That should be the standard. I mean, the defendants didn't spend a night in jail. The defendants had to post a reasonable bond, but weren't given a hard time about it. They've been let in through the back door, and they haven't been paraded through in jumpsuits or anything like that. The defense counsel has been vigilant in filing pre-motions that kind of change the way that things play out. You know, just look at the delay in the timeline, and the fact that the first jury ended up in a hung jury. Like I was saying earlier, most criminal defendants don't even get in front of a jury. There's so much pressure to plead out, and they don't have adequate representation. The defender's office is awesome, but they're overwhelmed because of overcharging and mass incarceration. There's only so much they can do. So I think it's a good lesson. You know, I wish we could model it for everybody who gets arrested. I'm not convinced that Porter should have ever been charged criminally.
Okay.
I think, you know, you've got a young officer, he made mistakes that violated policy perhaps. There's questions whether or not he was even up to speed on what the policies were. And it probably would have been a really good learning moment for the department to sit back and say, whoa, there's probably 200 more Officer Porters out here. We need to retool, retrain. I don't know that the criminal justice system was right in that case, but time will tell. I think we're too quick to charge. Usually we don't charge the police, so I know that's hard to wrap your mind around it, right? Because usually we don't. Usually we don't. We don't.
Well, Porter had not been Officer Porter. Just, you know, Porter from around the way with a hoodie and pair of jeans on, things would have worked out very differently.
Very differently. First of all, he'd still be in jail. He would have been paraded through that courtroom in his yellow jumpsuit or whatever they do now. He probably wouldn't have gotten a private attorney. He would have been, you know, dealing with the system. He would have faced a great deal of pressure to plea out for whatever the charges were. And then, even if he pled out to the very lesser charge and never did any more time other than time served, he's still probably going to be put on some sort of probation that's going to be very intrusive and make it very difficult for him to A, acquire employment, B, acquire decent housing, and 3, maintain it because of the disruption that probationary periods cause. So the whole thing, from nuts to bolts, is set up to make poor people fail. I don't care what color you are.
My name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic.
Dorothy T., and I am an alcoholic.
For so long, alcohol has sort of been there for me to sort of see me through social situations.
Drinking was more important than anything else.
My journey in AA started years ago when I reached the outside limits of my desperation.
I really wanted to quit drinking, I just couldn't stop on my own. And you know, I remember when I woke up on the day that I got sober, I felt something inside of me tell me that I could go to AA.
These people, you know, just gathered around me. That was the fellowship in action in my life.
The moral of my story today is that AA has never let me down, ever.
If I carry any sort of message with my story, it's that, you know, keep coming back and that this thing does work.
If you have a problem with alcohol, contact AA. It works.
No 2 days are alike. So every day, you prepare. For yourself, for those you love, for whatever the day may bring. Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies, as well as any important documents you may need. Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. Ready.gov/myplan.
Bam, that should be gone. I think it's ridiculous. I don't understand why it's there. I mean, I'm trying to think historically why it's there, and I don't, you know. Yes, with a caveat. So, historically, police chiefs have been largely white males. Historically, from my perspective, I saw people within the department, be it race or gender or sexual orientation, being treated differently than the people that looked like the chief. So some of these protections that are in place actually do provide protections not just to the people that look like the chief, but also to the people that don't. So I wouldn't want to institute reforms that are actually going to roll back the protections that other people that are not the majority of the department have. So that's, for me, that's hard, because I've seen it cut both ways. And that's why I'm saying maybe we do a bifurcated system where police misconduct is handled one way when it's involving the citizen, but internal agency disputes are handled a different way. Maybe that's the compromise. I'm not sure. But the chief should be able to ultimately decide who's working for them. So currently, I believe you're not allowed to suspend an officer without pay unless they've been charged criminally with a felony. And it seems to me that that might be a little bit restrictive. Mm-hmm. That there are some offenses that, even though it might not amount to a criminal felony, are enough or have happened enough where there's been multiple violations that I don't want that guy working for free until I figure out how to fire him. Ooh. Even though he's not working, right? He's suspended with pay. I don't necessarily know that's going to get everybody's attention. I suspend you without pay. Now you're going to be thinking. So I think it's a reasonable reform if it's funded. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about unfunded mandates. If you set up this police accountability board and then you don't pay anybody to show up, or you can't hire the right people, then it's window dressing. I think we're definitely not investing enough in the main things that drive poverty. We're not investing enough in housing. We're not investing enough in jobs. We're not investing enough in reentry. We're not investing enough in just generally healthy conditions and good food and access to all the things that make people happy. So no, we're not putting taxpayer dollars where they need to go. Having said that, if you've been to a Baltimore City Police precinct lately, or you've been inside of a Baltimore City police car, or you've looked at the uniform of a Baltimore City officer, oftentimes you're going to see very run-down conditions. And so officers that don't have the tools they need to feel good about themselves as officers aren't necessarily going to be as professional as they might otherwise be. So I don't think that we should put more cops on the streets, but I think with the police that we have an obligation to make sure they're properly trained, to make sure they're properly equipped, and to make sure that they can feel good about what they're doing every day. And so it's like, yes, we need to put more resources into all the above, and until we do that, we're not going to see any sort of difference long term, I don't think. But the reason we saw the spike in crime, it's anybody's guess. There's always multiple factors. I am a firm believer that the uprisings, the curfews, the disruption in the existing drug routes, and the infusion of the pharmaceuticals that came from the robberies from the pharmacies all contributed to a great amount of disorder in the underground drug trade. And when you tell people, or when people find themselves in a trade and they have no access to the courts, which is essentially the drug trade, unless you're being charged criminally, you have no access to redress your complaint. So if you get into a dispute with your source, or if you get into a dispute with your client, or if you get into a dispute with your competitor, you have no place to go to iron out those problems other than the streets. And when you're forced into a cash economy, there's always going to be predators that are looking to rob you off because they know you're not going to call anybody. And the whole, it's a hot mess, and we need to fix it from the roots. And a big part of that is moving away from prohibition. Prohibition has not worked. It's never going to work. Part of me wants to say, just put it all up on the internet and let someone like yourself call through it and figure out what's newsworthy and what's not. Part of me remembers going on calls where I was trying to serve a warrant in a not so good part of town, and knock on the front door. And if I had my body camera on, the lady opens without a shirt, and she's like shaking her junk everywhere and freaking out and telling me she doesn't know where her nephew or son or daughter, whoever it was I was looking for. I'd be like, she's having a bad day. She's having a bad moment. I would hate to see that uploaded to the internet and for her to have to live with that because, I was on the front step of her house, for God's sake, and didn't get invited in. So I think that there's going to have to be some reason, because, like I said, when you call the police and you're not just clearing a corner, it's for something really important in your life, and you're at your most vulnerable. And is that going to make people not want to call the police? And maybe sometimes that's a good thing, because I think we call the police way too much. We should be calling a social worker for half this stuff. But so it's going to be interesting. I don't know where we're going to come down on that. There's probably going to be some case law. It's going to set some sort of balancing act, like we always do, or a test. There's going to be a test or a balancing act that'll determine whether or not this footage should be released after the public information request is denied, and the person who took all the time to write that decides to appeal it, and then that's going to take years. So it'll be a while. The law moves slow. Civil asset forfeiture, however, is driving me insane, and it needs to be abolished across the books.
Why?
Why? Because it's being abused, and the people whose money is being taken is not the people that you think. It's everyday citizens that happen to get stopped and frisked. They have some cash in their pocket, either because they cashed a check, or they're dealing in a cash economy, or that's just, I usually carry around some money. I have friends in my neighborhood. They're like, when I was talking to them about this last year, I said, there's no threshold for how much cash you can have on you in order for the police to seize it. In the state police, we usually said, $1,000, $1,500, $3,000, depend on the circumstances. But really, we could take as much as 20 or as much as, 15 cents if we wanted to. It all came down to discretion. And these guys go out and they buy their big toys, their cars, their RVs, and they're like, are you kidding me? I'm going up to Pensy and I'm taking 45 grand with me because I know I'm going to get a better deal if I take cash. And I'm not worried about it. But if someone from, not the suburbs, does that same sort of thing and has that much money on them and happens to run into law enforcement, it's going to get snatched up. And then the burden shifts from the person whose money it is to from the state to the person whose money it is. They have to prove that it wasn't the result of illegal activity. They have to prove that. And what is happening is you go into court and it's just, let's make a deal. Look, and you've got these immigrants, people who barely speak the language, barely understand the culture, trying to start up a new business so they can have a life for their families, and they're dealing largely in cash. They come to court for these ridiculous interactions where there's a city solicitor there and there's no lawyers for the people whose money that was taken by and large. And they let's make a deal. Oh, okay, you have a receipt. I'll give you 50% of your money back. Well, no, you shouldn't be able to take my money unless you've charged me and convicted me of a crime. If you want to hold it in escrow for a little while, I can probably live with that in some of these criminal asset forfeiture cases. Civil asset forfeiture should not be happening in America. It's a bad policy.
Hi, I'm here for my flu shot, and I understand that there are options for people who are 65 and older.
There are, but you don't look 65.
It's very flattering, but you know who I am. I just turned 65, and I know the immune system gets weaker with age.
Well, I don't think that we've met, but there's no way you were 65.
What if I said I only have one life to live, so I need protection against the flu? How about who's the boss of my health?
You've never seen Who's the Boss?
Oh, my boss is in the back.
See? Flu season is here, and people 65 and older need to ask about the vaccine made specifically for their age. And it's particularly important for people who have conditions like heart disease and diabetes.
Judith Hawaii, great seeing you. Come on back.
Visit the National Council on Aging at ncoa.org/flu to learn more and talk to your doctor about vaccine options for people 65 and older.
Look, I'm really sorry about that. I thought you were 35.
Don't apologize.
No 2 days are alike. So every day, you prepare. For yourself, for those you love, for whatever the day may bring. Being prepared is a part of who you are. But in the case of a disaster, preparation isn't always front of mind. In an emergency, when help and resources may not be available for days, being prepared is more important than ever. It's up to everyone to be informed about what types of emergencies might occur where you live or visit. Knowing the best responses for your personal circumstances is the key to maintaining your health, safety, and independence. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency and how a personal support network can assist you. Build a kit that contains the specific things you need to survive for several days: food and water, medication and supplies, as well as any important documents you may need. Being prepared is a part of who you are, and disaster preparation is no different. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Be informed, make a plan, build a kit, get involved. ready.gov/myplan.
My name's Mark. I'm an alcoholic.
Dorothy T., and I am an alcoholic.
For so long, alcohol has sort of been there for me to sort of see me through social situations.
Drinking was more important than anything else.
My journey in AA started years ago when I reached the outside limits of my desperation.
I really wanted to quit drinking. I just couldn't stop on my own. And you know, I remember when I woke up on the day that I got sober. I felt something inside of me tell me that I could go to AA.
These people, just gathered around me. That was the fellowship in action in my life.
The moral of my story today is that AA has never let me down, ever.
If I carry any sort of message with my story, it's that, keep coming back and that this thing does work.
If you have a problem with alcohol, contact AA. It works.
Right. So this is going to sound kind of crazy. I have a theory about this. My theory is that as the marijuana legalization movement was cascading across the nation and internationally now, cascading, that the DA became scared, fearful for their own safety, because they were literally addicted to marijuana. I don't care what they tell you. All police departments were addicted to marijuana. I don't mean personally addicted. I mean addicted in terms of the job security that flows from that drug trade. So they were looking, a few years back, they were looking at the landscape and saying, well, we need to figure out another business to get into. And they turned to the pills, the pill mills. And they started shutting down, because you have doctors in different communities that are well-known pain management specialists that have been well-known for years for prescribing and perhaps over-prescribing opioids to all different parts of the state. But they were legal because they were prescription drugs. So the DEA, in their infinite wisdom, decided to crack down on these pill mills. And what happened was that the doctors then became very fearful for their DEA licensing. I think the DEA actually went after a few doctors as examples. And the doctors then began cutting patients off and saying, sorry, I can't serve you anymore. And when that happened, the patients by that time were already chronically addicted to these opioids, and it's not something that you can just stop taking overnight. And the whole methadone disaster has been a disaster, but it does speak to the fact that a lot of times when people get hooked on opioids, it's kind of going to be a maintenance thing for life with some folks. So anyway, when the pills were no longer available, Emily from Harford County now has to turn to the streets. And Emily from Harford County now has to go to an unregulated market and buy a product that is going to be cut with something she's not familiar with. She's not going to be able to read the pill and figure out how many milligrams are in there. She's just not sure what she's getting. And then when she takes said medication, usually secretly because of the stigma, she doesn't tell anybody, she doesn't surround herself with a supportive network that can be there if she should overdose, and she dies. And so now there's this whole, oh my goodness, it's an epidemic. Well, you're right. This has been going on in Baltimore City and other areas for years, and nobody gave a shit because it was poor people and it was people that were viewed as disposable, right? But suddenly Emily is not disposable, and we have to do something about it. And don't get me wrong, I think it's fabulous that we're beginning to focus on harm reduction techniques. More treatment on demand, more beds on demand, but we also have to figure out how to address that. People are never going to stop wanting their drugs. And we have an obligation as a society to make sure they're not getting stuff that's going to kill them, if we can. And we do. So that's kind of my theory as to how it all happened. And now, in Harford County at least, it's been very interesting to watch. The sheriff is very well intended. He's a dear friend of mine. He decides that he's going to equip all of his officers with naloxone, which is the drug that, as soon as you give it to the patient, will block the opioid from hitting the respiratory system, and so you don't die. You wake up, you throw up, you're very sick, and you're pissed off, but you're not dead, which is a great alternative. I think they should be in every first aid kit in every house across the country, personally. But he gave them to his officers, to his credit, and he sends his officers to a report of an overdose, but he also was sending an investigator to interrogate that person once they came to as to their source. Not helpful, right? Because now people were afraid to call the police. So what we've seen in Harford County is that overdose deaths have not gone down. In fact, they're going up. So that strategy is not working. And then most recently, the sheriff decided to institute drug saturation patrols. And he enlisted the help from the State Highway Administration to install variable message signs that read, "Heroin checkpoint ahead." Even though, according to him, subsequently, there was no heroin checkpoint. It was just a public awareness campaign. And what they did is that when everyone kind of veered off, they had other officers set up around the county to stop them and pull them over, and they locked up maybe 12 people, 15 people maybe. for different things. So it's fascinating, but law enforcement can't fix our drug problem. Our doctors, our nurses need to be able to do that in cooperation with the public, and law enforcement needs to back off. Unless you're hurting somebody else or stealing, that's it. Other than that, leave it alone.